It's not on our website.
Oh, maybe it's on my, oh, it says online oneg. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we're good to go then.
Okay. That's good. I think that's okay.
Yeah, it's on the website. I see it.
Perfect.
Okay, well, that is a little bit inhibiting because, you know what I mean? Because you don't know who's watching. And so
Yeah.
you have to be careful. You have to practice economy of language and be more careful with our comments because anybody could be watching. That's a strange thought.
Mm.
Do you want it turned off?
No, it's okay. I'll just be careful. You don't want to get too personal, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you never know. I mean, in these days, things tend to devolve quickly. And 1 minute you're telling a joke, the next minute you're sobbing, you know, and tears and laughter are sitting right next to each other on the perimeter of human responses to challenge. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
You see it?
Tears and laughter are sitting right next to each other. And we actually have an especially heavy session today, actually. So what the heck, though? Let's misbehave. All right, I guess we can start, huh? I let people in as they come, right? Because I'm managing the ante room. What's it called? Before they come in, the waiting room. Okay.
I can manage it.
Well, you don't have to. I mean, you know, whatever you want. I think we can make it work. Welcome, everybody, to the Wednesday evening class. And I wrote a piece the other day about how teaching in this period is different, and how it's different. I thought it was a good piece. And it was just a couple of paragraphs to my colleagues about how it felt to me to be teaching now and why I thought it was different. So I'm going to read you that piece. This is called Teaching in the Time of Virus. I started by keeping the same routine, even the same sort of discourse. That worked a week or so after quarantine. I taught mostly from original texts. Pretty heady stuff. At the last class of that series, we were already in the Zoom era, and I happened to mention in passing a meditation I once pulled out of a juicy passage in Sefer Zohar. that seemed to me to be the kind of contemplation on light from a candle. It had to do with encountering the darkness around the flame and the hidden qualities of light perceived at the intersection of fire and light. I had written up the piece as a guided meditation a long time ago. I don't think I had ever taught from it or about it. The class jumped on it, asked me to bring it, and all of us would sit in front of our screens with a candle in our discrete locations. Okay, okay. The night of the class, about 20 of us sat in front of our screens and stared into the candles we had fired up for the session. I realized we were in new territory. So I am being stretched, good stretched. The next session was a kind of meditation on matzah as a symbol of inwardliness, Emerson, that does not assume a change of substance. We are what we are becoming. We are becoming what we are, a non-alchemy symbol of transformation. Instead of staring into a candle, we encountered the senses associated with a taste and see that God is good approach to a piece of matzah. I have learned that the teachings have been revised. The teachings have become embodied, so to speak. And everyone wants to read Camus. So when I wrote that piece, I anticipated the next session, which was this session, actually, on a piece of matzah. So I guess I'll start with that, with the matzah and what I was referring to in that piece. After some years of teaching about the things that are required to discuss at the Seder, the three things, the Pesach, the Maror, and the Matzah. You know, I dealt with all of them over the years in many different ways, and it's interesting. But the Matzah was the one that changed the most for me in years of teaching. And it clarified for me one year that when we were dealing with matzah as a symbol of transformation, of change, we were dealing with a substance that doesn't change its form, it doesn't change its substance, and still being a matter of transformation, but not from one substance to another. Because what matzah is and what matzah isn't is the same substance. It's made of the same substance. So matzah is as a symbol of an inner symbol is a continuum. And if you interrupt the mixing of matzah before it has a chance to inflate, you bake it before it has a chance to inflate, you have matzah. So matzah is basically chometz, what we don't eat, in arrested development. But it's the same thing. It's not a different substance. So what we don't eat is the same substance as what we eat. It's just a different place along the continuum of combination and baking and etc. of fashioning matzah. So that started me thinking about what an interesting symbol of inner life that is, because in a sense, that's a way of saying that what we are becoming, we, in some sense, we already are. We are in some sense. We're in the, it's a continuum. It's not something turning into something else, which is what most of our symbols of transformation are about. You turn something into something else. Like all of our fairy tale stories are like that. You turn something into something else. What Jung called alchemy. He was interested in those alchemy kinds of symbols where you transform something into something else. But this is the same thing. It's matzah. It's chametz. So it opened up to me something really interesting about the symbols of this time of year and about transformation. And then where we would go this week would be, we would enter into something that gets very heavy now this week, because as we leave the Pesach, in our reading in our book this week, we go into Leviticus Shmini, and we're also in the holidays, the ceremonies of memorial. You know, so we got today, for example, is the anniversary, the 75th, I believe it is, anniversary of the liberation of Bergen-Belsen. And how do I know this? Is because there was somebody in my neighborhood, you know. I grew up in a neighborhood with many, many survivors. And when we were kids, we knew there was something different in the homes that had this experience, but we didn't know what it was because the generation before us didn't talk about it. And their attitude was basically, let's protect our children from this sinister wisdom that we have. But the town that I grew up in was full of survivors. And it didn't really come out until we started going to reunions, you know, and we started talking to each other. And of course, the reunion, somebody would say, you know, her mother, his mother, etc. And it became clarified for us as adults what we experienced as children in our little town was that there were some houses that had a different mark on them than other houses. And we noticed it, but we could not have articulated what it was till all those years later. It was a very strange experience to integrate that as an adult. But once we dialogued with each other, it explained so much about the way we all grew up in my town, just outside of Detroit. So I was I was fishing around today, and one of the girls I grew up with, you know, kids, I knew her since I was a kid, you know, her mom was in Bergen-Belsen. And she happened to post something about today was the day, you know, April 15th, 1945, the British, the 11th Armored Division, liberated Bergen-Belsen, and her mom was in that camp. And her mom is still alive. And as we were talking, she's in a place in Detroit in a enclosed, you know, like she can't, and she does okay. And anyway, it started me thinking about all that, and also that that this week's portion, Shmini from Leviticus, has a lot of implications for this subject. So I figured, you know, we got to go into it. In these, a lot of these portions, what I've done over the time that I've been teaching them is I've compiled a lot of the stuff into chapters. And a lot of times when I'm teaching these portions, so much comes up in the course of the teaching that I would write about them later from either what I hear from the students or things that change over the years and new ideas that arise. And, you know, that's the nature of this kind of study, is that it changes all the time. That's what keeps it interesting. So I'll pull up the piece that I have for this week's portion, and it's some interesting stuff. And maybe first we'll start with what's tomorrow is, maybe we'll do that first. Tomorrow is Yizkor, you know, where we do a ceremony 3 times a year. We remember those who have passed before us. And so at the end of Passover, you do a Yizkor service. So I pulled up the prayer for Yizkor. It's worth talking about. And let me do that first. Whoops. There it is. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Okay. So, oh, that's a poem I wrote. Whoops. Well, we can do that too. Oh, here's Yizkor. Okay. Can you see that? You have to pardon me. Okay. So here's the prayer that we read. It's called Yizkor, 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 Yizkor Elohim Nishmat, etc., etc. So what do we say first about this? What does Yizkor mean? From the root Zachar, Zecher, a memory. In this case, it's what's called a jessuv, which is a very interesting form. A jessuv is like, it looks like a future, but it's not really a future. English, it doesn't take well to. It's rich in classical languages, but in English, it's a little treacly, you know. May, it has the force of, it rolls off an imperative. It's not as forceful as an imperative. It's like a gentle, may God remember. The subject is God, Elohim. Yizkor Elohim, like may God remember or let God remember. It's a gentle rolling off the imperative. May God remember. The soul of, in this case, this version of it is my father, who has gone literally to his world. Ba'avur shebli neder, before, without a doubt, I will make tzedakah. I will make some tzedakah on his behalf. Now, that's an interesting phrase, bli neder, without a doubt. That means I don't, literally it means without a vow. I don't take a vow to bring tzedakah on his behalf, because a vow is exceedingly binding. I don't need to take a vow. If I say I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. If I had to take a vow, there's the implication that I needed a vow. You understand what I mean? It's an interesting phrase that we use in Hebrew a lot. Bli neder, without a doubt, which means, doesn't really mean without a doubt, it means without a vow. I'm not taking a vow, because a vow is binding. I don't have to take a vow. I say I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. Bli neder. So without taking a vow, I'm going to bring tzedakah. I'm going to give an act of tzedakah on his behalf. And for the merit of that, his soul will be bound up with the souls of the living, or could be understood as to be bound up with this, tied up or bound up with the soul, with all souls who are alive. And we use this phrase in the memorial prayer that we say when people die, that their souls are, and it's often on a gravestone. You'll see initials at the bottom of a gravestone with that stand for a phrase. You know, on the bottom of gravestones, you'll see a nun and a hey and a dot after it at the bottom. It stands for this phrase: may that person's soul be bound up, tzrura, tzrur, be bound up with the souls of either the living, or sometimes it's understood bound up in eternal life. Sometimes it's translated that way. it also can be understood as bound up with the souls of the living, so that at the level of soul to soul, we're always connected, you see. We're always connected with souls because souls are eternal, they don't pass. And the souls have the nature of the soul is that when you are connected with somebody, when you're bound up with somebody, when you're tied up with somebody that way, soul to soul, neshama to neshama, it's a relation that is never interrupted, never rescinded, even by death. It's permanent energy, this relation. So that's in the memorial prayer, Kael Malay Rach, God full of compassion, that we say at graveside. And it's in this prayer. So by virtue that we get the merit of the tzedakah that we give, the soul is bound up in the bond of life, or the bond of eternal life, or the bond of the living, or the bonds of the living, tied up together, wrapped up together. And with the soul of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, and the soul of Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, and all the souls of the righteous men and the righteous women who are in Gan Eden, who are in the Garden of Eden. And let us say amen. Now that's a nice prayer. That's a beautiful prayer, isn't it? Yizkor Elohim Nishmat. May God remember, or let God remember. May God remember. Yizkor, the remember of my beloved one, who has gone to his world, Bavur Shibli Neder, and without a doubt, and without taking a vow, I will give tzedakah. And by the merit of that, the soul will be bound up with the souls of the living, and the soul of Abraham, and the soul of Isaac, and the soul of Jacob, and the soul of Sarah, and Rebecca, and Rachel, and Leah, and with the rest of tzaddikim, the righteous, and tzidkaniot, the righteous men and the righteous women, Shebegan Eden, who are in the Garden of Eden, Vinomar, and let us say, Amen. And Vinomar is another interesting form, Vinomar, like we used in the Kaddish, not like we use in the Kaddish. In the Kaddish, you say V'imru, and say, imperative. This is not an imperative, Vinomar, and let us say. It's like the Jessup, though I think this is called cohortative when it's in the first person. And let us say, Vinomar, Amen, and let us say, Amen. Again, with that gentle rolling off the urgency of the imperative, something gentler. And let us say, Amen. Nice prayer. So then I wrote a poem, yeah. So here's a poem I wrote. Yizkor, the memory of a friend or family, the memory of my birthright, my parents, grandparents, my childhood home, my first school, the library, I remember. The memory of their old age, a vacation in the summer, a lunch at the beach, the card games, their friends at dinner, the way they laughed and cried when their parents died, the memory of our house, the memories of their parents, immigrants, a shop in the city, gold in the Medina, school, a job, a home, children. I remember the memories of my parents, of their parents, I remember. Blot the memory, let it be fixed. I remember their memories. crouching in a corner, cold room in Ukraine, Minsk, Belarus, Vilna, in Salonika, Casablanca, Kiev, Kishinev. I remember them hiding their children in a cellar, a broken leaf of a table for study, books by candlelight, the holy intent of our lives. While they howled in the street, we sat huddled together for warmth, reading our books, teaching our children. In a world without sense, we made sense. I remember it all. Whoops. Okay. Can you hear me? Okay, let's see. Whoops. Okay. So here, can you see that, Shmini? Sweet. So here we move to the this week's reading in our book, Leviticus. And it follows pretty nicely what we've done in the past weeks when we did the meditation on the light. You know, there's a lot in this week's portion about lighting the candles. Begins in Leviticus 10, and each day we lighting the candles. Whoops, no, it begins 9, excuse me. And you know, a lot of this portion is about Aaron and the sons of Aaron. Aaron, the progenitor of the priesthood, the priestly line. So all that we learn about Aaron is the ritual line, the ritual officiants, the sons of Aaron from Avot, Pirkei Avot. Aaron is loving all creatures and bringing them closer to God, the line, the priestly line that runs through Aaron, the prophetic line that runs through his brother, Moses. So I guess, let's see here. This came from that meditation that we did on the candle. Lighting the candles each day, hold the flame upward, the fire flying. Standing on the limestone steps, raising a fire, tender of the flame, the soul lamp of God, souls on fire. Love all creatures and draw them near. Through you, she comes to rest. See the blue around the flame, space that may not be present. Blue, that's her. That's the Shekhinah. Sky blue like lapis, like the color of the sea, like the sky, like the color of the throne of glory. This piece is on the tender of the sacred flames of Leviticus, who is that priestly line that we run through Aaron. And the way Aaron is described in Pirkei Avot as loving all creatures and bringing them closer to God. And in this portion, it has, sure enough, a scribal irregularity, which I always pay attention to. I love those scribal irregularities in the Torah in 42. Something that goes, this one is whatever goes upon the belly. Kol holech al gachon. The vav is strange. It's big. And whatever has many feet, and it describes, swarming things, not nice stuff. But the scribal irregularity is this big vav that appears in every Torah. So I wrote a little piece about that because I'm always interested in scribal irregularities in the Torahs, the way they're written. So the vav is written big in that crazy word on the belly. How many of the scribal irregularities of the Holy Torah invoke the and? Because that's what a vav means. A vav means and. V is and. The vav, which informs, connects the upper worlds and the lower worlds. That's the sense of the vav inform. It's a straight up and down letter. It's also and. So it's a connector. It's a conjunction. And also in form, it's a connector. It connects the upper worlds to the lower worlds in Kabbalistic terminology. And in content, it's also a connector because it means and. It signifies the holy and, A-N-D. The link, the elevated conjunction. I belong to you. You belong to me. We belong to God. God belongs to us. The integrative and. And as appears in Leviticus is, we were taught that why do we begin the study of the Torah with Leviticus? Because why do children get introduced to their study with this priestly stuff? Let the pure come and occupy themselves with the pure. That's the principle. That this material is the purest material in the Torah, and the children are the purest among us. So let the pure come and occupy themselves with the pure. So said the wondrous Rav Asi. So here's another piece I wrote about that too, about the building of the Mishkan, because that's where we're at in this story here. We're about the building of the sanctuary in the wilderness. And this portion begins with, it came to pass on the 8th day in chapter 9, that Moses called Aaron and his sons and the elders of Israel, and they gives them instructions. What's on the 8th day? That's the day that I think Rashi tells us that the sanctuary was set up. So according to, this is the day that we begin to kind of, we set up the sanctuary on this day. We inaugurated. And we welcome the priests and we induct the priests and all on the 8th day. So the building of the Mishkan was completed, 7 days of installation done, my brother presiding. That means Aaron, so Moses is speaking here. The Shekhinah had not yet appeared. This is from the Midrash. According to the Midrash, the Shekhinah is not there yet. And remember, this is the first objectification of the spirit. So we want to think that the Shekhinah is present there. The inner presence of God is dwelling there. I mean, we built it. We built this thing. We want to think that God dwells there. So, but the Shekhinah hadn't appeared yet. Oh, until I slipped into my robes. So now the Shekhinah is about to appear because he's getting dressed, he's wearing his fine robes and all that finery that's described throughout these portions. There's a lot of detail in these portions, and we might wonder, what's the purpose of these details? Why all this finery, this externals? What's the purpose of these externals? God the king, my brother the king's attendant, Israel the queen, myself the queen's attendant. working from the lower world up, so to speak. Here I am lighting the candles daily. This is Aaron. Aaron was depicted as the queen's attendant. Moses was the king's attendant. These two complementary aspects of godliness, one kingly, one queenly, one masculine, one feminine. Here I am lighting the candles daily. Take hold the flame upward, the fire flying. Always the fire is described as lifted up, lifted up, lifted up. See me standing on the limestone steps, raising high the flame I am. This is the flame of guardianship. Tender of the flame, that's me, which is like the soul, like the lamp of God, the soul of a human being from Proverbs. Tender of souls on fire. This, who am I? I'm Aaron. I loved all creatures and drew them near. So it was, my brother knew it would be through me. My brother Moses knew it would be through me that the Shekhinah would come to rest in our sanctuary, saying, this is from the Midrash, my brother is more excellent than I. This is Moses speaking. Through his sacrifices and his service, the Shekhinah will rest among you. It doesn't come through Moses. It comes through Aaron. The ritual, the Shekhinah comes through the ritual, through the rites of the priesthood. And then I do the thing with the light again, like we did when we looked into a candle. See the blue around the flame, the space that may not be physically present, that slip of dark space between wick and flame, the dark candle, the Zohar calls it, all light, all over. The blue, that's Shekhinah, sky blue, which is like lapis, like the color of the sea, which is like the sky, like the color of the throne of glory, like a vision. Okay, now we got a very heavy piece here. You want to deal with this? Some years ago, in this portion, I was called to do a funeral. Nobody lived here anymore. But the woman who died wanted to be buried here. So everybody came from somewhere else. Whoops, I got to do something. Okay. So the piece is comes from Leviticus 10, verse 12. So what happens right before it in Leviticus 10, verse 8 is God speaks to Aaron, tells them, don't drink any wine, nor your sons. When you go into the tent of meeting, when you go into the holy place, don't drink. Otherwise, you could die. And this will be a law throughout throughout the generations. Because you have to distinguish, between the holy and the not holy, and between the unclean and the clean. The implication is if you drink wine, you might not be able to make that distinction. You might not be able to make the distinction between what's holy and what's not holy, what's clean and what's corrupted. Because in verse 11, you have to teach the children of Israel all the laws and stuff. that was spoken by the hand of Moses. And if you're not clear, how are you going to teach them? So Moses speaks to Aaron and Eleazar and Itamar and his sons that were left. His sons that were left. He says, take the meal offering that remains by fire and eat it without leaven, because it is most holy, and you shall eat it in a holy place. So you take the two of his sons died because they brought strange fire. Nadav and Avihu, at the beginning of chapter 10, they bring something called strange fire. And they're consumed in the fire. So here in chapter 12, Moses says to Aaron and to the sons that were left who were surviving. And one year that word, those who were surviving, took on a whole different significance to me, because he's describing the two sons that are left. They're the survivors. The other two had died, were consumed by this fire. They had brought strange fire in it. They were consumed by it. So that year, I was called to do a funeral for these people. I didn't know anybody. There was nobody in town here. They were all staying at a hotel. And it was this week of this portion. So what they had described to me was the woman we were burying, their grandmother, mother, great-grandmother, had been in the selection line at Auschwitz. And she had described to her family Mengele and what his motions were, that terrible story, in making the selection. And she told this to me as we were sitting around a table the night before the funeral. And it was chilling to me. She demonstrated the motions with her hands. So I'm going to pick up the story from there. In this week's Torah, the reading connected to the events that we schedule around the Nazi horror memorials. Today, for example, the liberation of Bergen-Belsen. Next week, Yom HaShoah, the Holocaust Memorial Day. Whoops, I have to do something here. Okay.
I can let people in, Rabbi.
Oh, I didn't see you. Okay. In this week's Torah, the reading connected to the events that we schedule around the Nazi horror memorials after the death of Aaron's sons, Nadav and Avihu. The text refers to the surviving sons, Eleazar and Itamar, in Leviticus 10:12. As survivors, that's what they call, in English calls them survivors. They're the survivors, the surviving two of the four. That word, survivors, I never noticed it before that year. It's hanotarim. It's used twice in the verse, once to refer to the sons and once to refer to the remains of the offerings made by fire, the remains. You know, this is the book of Leviticus. There's much written about the clumsy application of fire language and offerings language associated with the Nazi horror. Thus the controversy over the word Holocaust. You know, Holocaust in Greek is a translation of an offering from Leviticus, olah, to be completely burnt up. And in Hebrew, though, offering is something that comes from a root to be lifted up. And the Greek translation of that turns it into something that's entirely burnt up. It's not the same as the Hebrew. And to be entirely burnt up doesn't really communicate the Hebrew sense of being offered up as an act of piety. So a lot of people really reject that language, the Holocaust, that word in particular, that fire language. That's what I'm referring to here. Thus the controversy over the word Holocaust. So that's when we went searching for another word, why we took the word Shoah, which means a complete destruction. Because the word that Holocaust, the Greek translation from the Hebrew, is a pious act. So it doesn't really work if you know the Hebrew. There's no piety in that. That year when I heard the story of the woman I buried, how inadequate the word survivor felt to me. I never thought about that word, survivor. It too felt passive for what this woman lived through, sitting with these people, these lives, these strangers who existed because she went one way, the girl next to her the other way. And in spite of the burdens laid on her fragile life, she endured. She endured, became a mother, and these people that I was sitting there with, her daughter, kids, grandkids, a great-grandchild, they are Hanotarim. They are alive and thrive out of the devastation of mother's early life. It seemed to me that's more than surviving. More. I recall my beloved teacher. I had a teacher who, whenever you passed him in the hallway, you would say, "How you doing, Dr. P?" He would say, "Surviving," in 3 syllables, always the same. "How you doing?" "Surviving." He walked out of Berlin just before the war. And his response always to the perfunctory, "How are you?" "Surviving," in 3 sing-song syllables, that even if you knew nothing about him, you recognized a depth of story and triumph and ascent in that 3 syllables response. Arbitrary and victorious. Surviving, as in, if not for this, if not for that, I would not have survived. And with a bow to those who did not. Now this Torah, this word applied both to the remnant of the offering burnt by fire and the 2 brothers alive, Hanotarim, as against the other 2 who were not, who brought strange fire. Fire and survival. What is that link, and what the danger, and what the aftermath? And who gets through? Hanotarim, we the survivors, the remnant, the rest of us, from the root Yud, Tav, Resh, that also gives extra. It means something from without, something acquired from an unexpected place, something brought in from without, so to speak, or something that remains, a remnant, as if remnant was something inviolable and ascendant. Hanotarim. This year it has a necessity that transcends surviving. It's a persistence about existence, what continues, what remains, what endures, what thrives. I'm going to pause here and allow you to talk. Whoops. I'm going to take this off. There.
Aren't we, the question I have is going all the way back to Enoch. Enoch was depicted as an individual that did not survive after he, from what I understand. So aren't we required to, you said that we weren't really required to observe the death and the righteousness and so forth like that. Isn't that, aren't we required to honor our parents and remember and so forth? Isn't that part of this idea why Enoch did not survive? And isn't that where we go with this question?
Well, from the Yizkor prayer, we honor them with that Yizkor prayer, with this gentle kind of the way we parsed it. That's the prayer that we say to honor those who've gone before us. It's a very gentle prayer, though, the way I showed you that it has an interesting sensibility and of being bound up in an interior way, an inside way, in that sense. And our souls, the way our souls are linked up in these permanent relations and the imagery of that. Not an obligation, it's more gentle than that. It's an acknowledgement of a deeper relation and of an energy that's rare and unique in the world. Permanent. Hey, Todd, you know who
Yeah, Jim. Yeah. Yeah, Rev.
it was? Fran Klein's mother.
I know.
Yeah.
I saw the post and
Yeah.
I told her that I had been to I can't even tell you how many concentration camps and death camps. There's a difference between the two, which I didn't really understand. But to me, Bergen-Belsen was the worst.
Todd is from the town I was talking about. We grew up in the same town where many of our friends' parents were survivors. That's where I began, Todd, with this story about.
Yeah, I'm sorry I missed the beginning.
It's all right, but I was just filling the other group in.
Yeah, no, it's just awesome. Thank you for letting me in. It's awesome.
Yeah, sure.
Rabbi Bergen-Belsen was where Anne Frank was.
Yes, and our friend's mother read stories to her.
Yeah, unbelievable.
Wow.
It's another part of the story.
Yisker's tomorrow, Rev?
Yeah.
Are you doing a service? Are you doing a service?
Yeah, it's in California. It's I don't know, so crazy.
Okay.
I don't know what the deal is. It's something worked out between Susan and her sister, who's in California.
I see.
She said 11 o'clock.
But
Our time, not.
11 o'clock
10
their time. No, 11 o'clock
11
there.
o'clock their time?
you can probably get in this way.
Oh, this way that I got in?
I think.
I searched it. I'm not a journalist, but I know how to find you.
I think so.
It's on YouTube. So
Oh, really?
yeah, there's some people on YouTube. In fact, Cindy was watching, and this gentleman, Paul. And is he on this? Is Paul on the Zoom?
I don't know.
No, I don't know. But I Googled it, and like if you don't know something, Google it,
You sound like my husband.
Jimmy and I grew up together, and he's a major influence on my life. One of my mentors, and he writes most of the stuff that I've done in my own work. I'm a photographer, and he's one of the major writers of all the. I mean, he's able to. I can't write, so he writes, and I'm very thankful.
Anybody have anything else?
Oh, at Base Abraham, the rabbi there a few years ago took out this bar of soap. And he said, this is from the Holocaust, that this is actually human skin and body.
No,
Fat. Human fat. Yeah, human
Yeah.
fat. And kind of puts it in perspective that, I mean, it was really, to me, it gave like the heebie-jeebies, if you can use that as a word, or the idea that that somebody can be so callous as to reduce a human life into a molecule or element. And everything else just kind of disappears. It's a frightful experience.
Well, we tracked something interesting into the Torah tonight, and it's something that we'll be thinking about, especially in the next couple of weeks. Every year, this portion appears at this time, and this is after Pesach. This is what we kind of turn our heads into, and it's all there in our book. And the book springs for us in a different way every year, if we're patient and let it speak. And that's the way it spoke to me one year, and also the way it's speaking this year in the terms of how you meet challenges with endurance, and more than endurance, with and more than survival, and with thriving, not just what endures, but what thrives. So that's the intention I leave you with as we do this thing, that we're enduring and we will thrive, and we will find a way to thrive. So thanks for coming, everybody.
Thank you.
I enjoy these Zoom sessions, and we'll be here next Wednesday, and some other things. I'm going to be doing some poetry reads and stuff like that, and some music online too. So I'll do that on my own Facebook feed. So keep an eye out for that. Thanks for showing up.
Thank you,
Thanks for
Rabbi.
thanks for doing
Thank you,
this.
Rabbi.
Thank you.
Everybody
Jim.
be well.
Be safe.
Yes,
Every-
everybody be well.
Everyone be well. Be safe.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Jim.
Bye-bye.
Ciao.